Well, hello everybody. This is Papa. I hope you're having a great day, and I sure enjoyed seeing some of your Halloween costumes. They were so fun. You guys really dressed up amazing. When I was a kid, we didn't dress up a whole lot for Halloween, and we just didn't have those kind of costumes available. We just sort of made stuff and did the best we could. And a lot of times, we just put on different play clothes that we had and used that as our costume. So sometimes I was a cowboy or an Indian or something like that. Or maybe a football player or something like that. But your costumes were, oh my gosh, just amazing. We love seeing those pictures. And now the next holiday coming up is Thanksgiving and then Christmas. And here in Arizona, the weather's changing and it's getting much cooler, and so it's fall. And so anyway, that's great. But I hope you guys are doing well. I have a real Papa story for you today, and I call them real because I write them. It's not me just reading a book to you that somebody else wrote. And so this is the second real Papa story, and it's called The Story of the Incredible Bathroom. So anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Each of you are in the story, and when I get to write a story, I get to write all the words, and so I put all of you in it, and I hope you enjoy that. So we'll go ahead and get started. This is a little bit longer story, and again, it's not really a book story because there's almost no pictures. I did do one drawing that I'll show you during the story. And so you'll see one of my pictures. But let's go ahead and get started. Again, I hope you guys are doing great. So again, I'm just going to read this, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, it was so cold outside. Winter had come very early this year, and the family was huddling around the wood stove in the kitchen, trying to stay warm. There was lots of talking and laughing, and everyone was happy to be together. But it was during this time that Lily suddenly said, "I am so tired of being so cold all the time. I just want to be warm. I wish I could get in a warm tub with the water all the way up to my chin." Everyone knew if you wanted to take a bath in the summer, it was pretty easy. You just went over to the creek or the pond and took a bath in the nice water. However, in the winter, things were very different. At the beginning of winter, you had to go to the shed and bring in a big tub and put it right smack middle in the kitchen. The kitchen is always the warmest room in the house because that's where the wood cooking stove was. And during the winter, the wood cooking stove has always got a fire in it. Taking a bath in the winter was a lot of work. You had to put a large pot of water on the stove and wait for it to finally get hot. While waiting, you would hang up some sheets around the tub to give you some privacy. When the water on the stove finally got hot, you would pour it into the tub and then refill the pot with cold water and put it back on the stove. It would take about an hour to get enough water to be able to take a bath. Even then, the tub would only have a couple of inches in it. There was barely enough warm water to sit in. You would usually be freezing while you're trying to get clean. But that's the way it was. As a result, winter baths almost never happened. Can you imagine that? Sometimes instead of going through all the work for a bath, you would just dip a washcloth in a pan of warm water and wipe it on yourself to be clean. Everyone in the family was silently looking at Lily. The thought of being warm all the way to your chin brought a big smile to everyone's face. To be honest, it wasn't just Lily that felt that way. Everyone was completely tired of being cold, and there were still several months of winter ahead of them. This family consisted of the mom and the dad, and Davis and Elise and Isaac and Caleb and Sarah and Jake and Laura and Parker and Gemma, Levi, Lucy, Janae, and cute little Evie. There was something very special about this family. The kids were simply amazing at figuring out how to make life better. They had invented a number of things and were actually very famous in this part of the country. Each of the kids had clearly heard Lily's comments, and they were all thinking of how nice it would be to be surrounded by warm water all the way up to their chins. That pleasant thought was all that was needed to get these super smart kids thinking about how they might be able to make this dream come true. It started with Laura breaking the silence and saying, "I would love to be able to take a hot bath whenever I wanted, and not in just a few inches of water, but in a tub full of water that surrounded me with warmth. I just want to be warm." It was then quiet for a few minutes as they were starting to individually think of how nice it would be to be warm. Then Parker said, "I think we should try to figure out a way to make lots of water so we could really fill a bathtub. That would be so awesome." And then Jake said, "How could we ever do that? It takes forever to heat up a pan of water on the wood stove." And then Davis said, "Jake is right. The problem is that we just cannot heat up that much water very quickly. It takes forever, even to get a few inches in the tub." Then Gemma said, "I know, we can figure out something amazing to heat the water. We just need to think about it." Sarah then said, "The way we heat water now works okay for doing dishes, but not for a tub." Elise was thinking about all of this and then said, "Right now we get a little bit of water very hot. I wonder if there is a way to instead get lots of water warm instead of hot." Caleb thought about this for a minute and said, "I got it. Maybe we can make a bigger top on the stove, so instead of just one pan, we could put several pans of water on it at the same time. That way we could get 2 or 3 times the hot water each time." Lucy looked at Caleb and said, "That is a great idea, but I think it would still take well over an hour to get enough for a bath, and there would still be a lot of carrying and filling the pots. I wish we didn't even have to use the pans at all." Then Isaac said, "I love that idea of doing away with the pans, but how in the world could we do that?" Then Levi said, "How in the world can you heat water without a pan on the stove? That is the question we should be thinking about." These genius kids each started quietly thinking about Levi's last statement. Then Janae broke the silence and said, "What if we built a special water tank to heat the water? It could hold all the water we need for the bath." Then Evie said, "How would we heat such a big tank?" Then Sarah said, we could put the tank outside and raise it up so we could build a big fire under it. Laura thought about that and then said, but then we would have to always go outside and keep the fire going. I don't think I would want to keep going outside, and I'm not sure it would be that much easier. Then Isaac said, we already have a fire in the kitchen stove all winter. Why don't we try to use that somehow? Then Parker said, what if we could add a second pipe for the kitchen faucet and run it over to the stove and then wrap that pipe all around the stove? Maybe that would heat up the water. Well, that's a different idea. Caleb was thinking about what Parker had just described. Then he said, that is really interesting. So you're saying we could run a new pipe from the sink over to the stove, and then as the water moves through the pipe and goes around the stove, it might get warm enough for the tub. Very interesting idea. The good news is that we could just keep using the wood stove that already heats our home and not have to keep other fires going. Davis thought about this and said, this is really an interesting idea. I really like it. I just don't know if it would get hot enough. Then Gemma said, well, instead of having the pipe go around the outside of the stove, maybe we could just have it go inside the stove right next to the hot fire. That would be a lot hotter, and it may just be enough to make the hot water work. Jake was thinking about what Gemma had just said. I really like Gemma's idea, and I really like putting the pipe inside the stove. Levi said, I love that idea. However, I'd love it if we could get the tub out of the kitchen. I hate having to take the bath in the middle of the kitchen. Why don't we build a room just for that tub, especially if we're going to be using it more and staying in it a lot longer? Then Elise said, we could easily add a room attached to the house at the end of the hallway. That way we could have a room just for taking baths, which would be so amazing. Lucy said, now that would be really wonderful. The tub takes up most of the kitchen, and when someone takes a bath, no one else can go in the kitchen. I think it would be great to have a separate room for the tub. Janae said, that is a genius idea. I absolutely love it. Evie had a huge smile on her face and said, I think we are on to something. Should we take a vote to see if we all agree? Then Elise said, all in favor of doing this plan, please stand up. With that, every one of these super smart kids stood up and shouted, Yahoo, yippee-I-do. They always loved to say, Yahoo, yippee-I-do, whenever they were excited. Let's stop for a minute. Can you say, Yahoo, yippee-I-do? Let's try it. Yahoo, yippee-I-do. Well, even though the kids were super excited to get started on the plan, they realized that if they could not make the hot water, there would be no reason to build the extra room on the house. So they decided to put all their efforts into figuring out if the kitchen stove could actually make lots and lots of hot water. With that, Davis, Levi, Elise, and Sarah went to the shed to look for some pipe. After a while, they found exactly what they were looking for. Then they started bending it into small bends so they could put about 30 feet of the pipe inside the wood stove. Can you imagine bending pipe and then putting 30 feet inside the stove? Once they finished bending the pipe, they put it in the stove and then drilled 2 holes in the sides of the stove so they could connect to the outside pipes. It took about 2 hours to get the pipe bent and able to fit into the stove, and then connect the fittings on the outside of the stove. Once the work on the stove was done, they ran a new pipe from the sink to the stove, and then a pipe from the stove to the bathtub in the kitchen. And kids, what I did is I drew a picture. Can you see this picture? So there's the sink, and you can see they added a new pipe that goes up to the ceiling and over to the wood stove and down the wood stove, and then it goes into the wood stove. And look at all the bends they made inside the wood stove. So when they shut the doors, all that pipe is inside with the fire. Can you see all the bends and how much pipe is in there? And when the water, it takes time for the water to go through all of that, and then they added a new, can you see where they put a new place where it comes out and it goes over to the bathtub, and then it fills the bathtub. So cold water comes over to the stove. This was the idea the kids had so they wouldn't need to have a pan. And then the cold water goes down and around, and then it goes inside right by the fire. And as the water takes that long journey, it's in there for a little while, and the fire makes that water from cold to hot. And then it comes out as hot water and goes straight into the bathtub. Do you see all that? That's what the kids were working on. They don't know if it's going to work or not. It's just their idea. So let's keep the story going and seeing what happens. They were now up to the most important part of the plan. They had just built what I showed you. All of the kids were a little nervous, but also very excited to see if their new idea would actually work. There was no way to know for sure until they tried it. Gemma and Lucy built a good fire in the stove. Once the fire was going, everyone decided Lily should be the one to try it since this was her idea. She walked over to the kitchen sink and slowly turned on the water. The water started flowing from the sink up to the ceiling, over to the stove, and then down the chimney to the stove. It then went inside the stove, where it went around and around and around, and finally came back out and went over to the tub in the kitchen. All the kids were gathered around, waiting to see if the water coming out of the stove would be warm. To everyone's excitement, the water coming out was not just warm. It was actually very hot. They let the hot water flow into the tub for several minutes, and as it kept flowing from the tub, the water stayed super hot. They couldn't believe it. Hot water just kept coming and coming and coming and filling up the tub. This was awesome news. Their invention is working. The kids were jumping up and down as the water continued to come out. But all of a sudden, they stopped jumping and started to worry that their invention was almost working too good, as the water coming out was way too hot for a bathtub. Davis went over to the sink and turned off the water, and everyone sat down to think about this. This was very unexpected. No one had thought that the water might be too hot to use the tub. What were they going to do? All of these super smart kids were quiet for a while as they each thought about this. Then Isaac said, "I think I've got it. We can partially fill the tub with really hot stove water, and then fill the big pot in the kitchen with cold water and walk it over to the tub and just pour it in. That would cool it off. And it may just take a couple of pots to get the tub just right. Then Levi said, Isaac, that would work. But we could also just fill the tub in the morning. And anyone that wants a bath would just need to wait until evening. By then, the water will have cooled down and could be just right. Then Jake said, I sort of like Levi's idea. But what if we ran another water pipe from the kitchen faucet directly to the tub? That way we could use the cold kitchen water to cool down the hot water without ever needing to fill and carry the pot. Then Parker said, wait, what if we don't make the fire so hot? We could just make sure that when we want to take a bath that the fire is starting to die out. That would work. And we wouldn't have to build another pipe from the kitchen sink. Then Levi said, that is a great idea, Parker. But what if we just turn up the water from the sink that goes through the stove? If the water goes faster, I bet it would not get as hot. So we could just control the temperature by how fast the water goes through the pipes. Suddenly it was quiet again, and the kids thought about this new problem of the super hot water. What is the best way to cool down this water? The kids had come up with great ideas, so many of them, and each was so different. The silence and the thinking continued. Finally, Davis spoke up. You know, I think every one of these ideas will work. However, I really like the idea of having a hot water pipe and a cold water pipe. It will make it so we can get the water just right, and maybe we can even fill the tub faster if we use both pipes. Then Lucy said, I agree with Davis, but I think we can improve the design by having the faucets right at the tub. That way, when we're in the tub, you can turn the water on and off and change the temperature without even getting out of the tub and going to the kitchen to change the water. Caleb said, I agree. That would be a lot easier. I would love that idea. Then Gemma said, I think we are starting to like this idea. Should we vote on it? Everyone nodded. Then Laura said, okay, if you are in favor of this plan, please stand up. And with that, every one of these great kids stood up and yelled, Yahoo! Yippee-I-do! As loud as they could. That meant they were excited and they all agreed. Yahoo! Yippee-I-do! Everyone knew that this design was probably going to work. They were super excited and anxious to get to build it. With that, everyone organized into smaller teams, with Laura, Janae, Gemma, Lucy, and Levi building the new bathroom that would actually be attached to the house. Parker, Lily, and Sarah began to get the bathtub out of the kitchen, and they also started preparing for where the pipes would be going. Then Jake, Isaac, Caleb, and Evie began to run the new hot and cold water pipes from the stove and sink over to the new tub room. Davis and Elise started working on making 2 valves for the pipes so they could turn the water on and off right from the tub without having to go back to the kitchen every time you wanted to change the water temperature. Things went really fast once these kids went into motion. By that evening, everything was done. After all this work, the kids were excited to see if their new invention would actually work. They invited Mom and Dad to be part of the grand opening. Everyone was so excited. Dad saw their smiles and said, okay, I've seen these smiles before. Just what have you kids been working on today? Sarah said, we have been making something we think you and Mom will absolutely love, And then Janae said, have you ever wanted to take a wonderfully hot bath all the way up to your chin whenever you wanted? Dad then said, I'm sorry, Janae. That would take up, I don't think that would work. I just don't think that would work. I know you guys are super smart, but frankly, I just don't think that is even possible. Then Elise said, well, I think you're going to be in for a big surprise. The kids put blindfolds on Mom and Dad and held their hands and walked them down the hall to the new tub room. Once they were in the tub room, the kids took off their blindfolds, and Mom and Dad both looked around and just kept blinking their eyes. And then they said, where are we? Where did this room come from? Their house was not very big, but they had never seen this room before. Then Parker said, welcome to your new bathtub room. You can now come in here and take a hot bath whenever you want. Mom and Dad just looked at each other in disbelief. Then Lily reached over and opened the valve, and everyone watched the hot water flow into the bathtub. And the water was really hot. Then Lily turned on the cold water until the water filling the bathtub was just perfectly warm and comfortable. The perfect water just kept coming and coming and filling the tub. Mom and Dad could not believe their eyes. They were standing in a new room they'd never seen before, attached to their house, and the tub was quickly getting fuller and fuller and fuller of perfectly warm water. Everyone was so excited that they just kept watching the tub fill up. Then Mom reached into the tub and ran her hand through the very warm water and said, this is the neatest thing I've ever seen. This is like a miracle. I just can't believe what I am seeing. It's so amazing. I absolutely love what you kids have built. Before they knew it, the tub was absolutely full of warm water. Not just 2 or 3 inches full like it had always been before, but we're talking a real full tub that would come all the way up to your chinny chin chin. Then Dad said, oh my, this is the most wonderful thing I've ever seen. Can you imagine what this would have been like compared to what you were used to? Then Lily said, well, if you will excuse me, I would like to take a very nice hot bath in the middle of the winter with the water all the way up to my chinny chin chin. No one argued with Lily. This had been her idea from the start, and everyone knew they would have their turn. Everyone left, and Lily closed the door and slowly sank into the tub. Words cannot express how perfectly wonderful it felt to be fully surrounded by such warmth. It was glorious. She stayed in the tub for about half an hour before finally deciding to get out. When she came out of the bathroom, she had a huge smile on her face and was finally warm all the way to the bone, and it felt so wonderful. Everyone wanted to know what it was like. Lily said, it is indescribable. It is so wonderful. I think I will want to take a bath every day. Everyone was so excited, and everyone wanted to be next. Over the next few days, everyone had their first hot bath in the new tub room. It was going to make getting through these long winters so much more enjoyable. Then one night, about a week later, there was a knock on the door. Evie answered the door, and it was Mr. Jacobs, who had the farm next to them. He wanted to talk to Dad. Evie told him that Dad was taking a hot bath and that he would be getting out in a few minutes. So she invited Mr. Jacobs to come in and have a seat. Mr. Jacobs looked past Evie and could not see anyone in the kitchen. Then he said, how could he be taking a bath? He's not in the kitchen where he should be. Where is he? It was true. Dad was not in the kitchen where he should be. In fact, there wasn't even a tub in the kitchen. This all seemed very strange to Mr. Jacobs, and it didn't make any sense at all. He was starting to think that maybe Evie just didn't know what she was talking about. But he came in and sat down anyway and started to wait. A few minutes later, the door opened from the tub room and out came Dad. Mr. Jacobs was stunned and very confused. I thought you were taking a bath, but you weren't in the kitchen. What is going on here? Dad said, well, the kids have been up to it again and created another one of their wonderful inventions. And I think I am falling in love with this one. Then Mr. Jacobs said, wait, I'm totally confused. Nothing you and Evie are saying makes any sense. Dad looked Mr. Jacobs right in the eye and said very quietly, almost like it was a secret, they invented a way to make a hot bath anytime you want. It's super fast and you don't even have to boil water. Mr. Jacobs just looked at Dad for a moment and then said, I'm sorry, but that is actually impossible. Everyone knows you can't have hot water without putting a pan on the stove and waiting for it to get hot. And I don't even see any pans on the stove. So there's no way you could have just taken a bath right now. Besides, you don't even have a bathtub in the kitchen. I think you're lying to me. What is really going on here? Dad said, well, our amazing kids came up with a great idea, but instead of me trying to tell you about it, maybe I should just show you. They both walked down the hall and into the new room that had the tub in it, and then Dad turned on the valve and out flowed the wonderful hot water, and it began to fill the tub very quickly. Mr. Jacobs' mouth dropped almost to his knees. When they say almost to the knees, it's like, ah! He could not believe what he was seeing. He rubbed his eyes 3 whole times and kept seeing the same thing. He stood there and just watched as the tub filled with hot water. It was unbelievable. It was magic. He couldn't believe it. Finally, Mr. Jacobs said, I have a question. I thought I would never ever ask anyone this question, but I really want to ask this question. Dad asked, what is it, Mr. Jacobs? Then Mr. Jacobs seemed a little embarrassed. He looked around to make sure no one else could hear him. Then he said very quietly, can I take a bath in your house right now? Dad was surprised, but then he said, that is a very interesting question, and you're right. No one has ever asked me if they could take a bath in my house. But I think in this case, that would be okay. Mr. Jacobs immediately smiled for the first time since coming over. He had totally forgotten what he'd come over to talk to Dad about. All he could think about was getting in that tub full of hot water. Dad got Mr. Jacobs a towel and turned off the water when the tub was full, and then left the room and closed the door. Mr. Jacobs was in there for a very, very, very long time. In fact, Mom and Dad and the kids were starting to wonder if anything had happened to him. Finally, after almost an hour, the door opened and a very, very warm and happy Mr. Jacobs emerged. He had a huge smile on his face, and all he said was, I want one of these. This is the best thing I have ever seen. I still don't know how it works, but I know one thing for sure. I want one. He talked to the kids and asked if they would do the same thing for him. They said yes, and he was so excited. Over the next few days, the kids built Mr. Jacobs his own separate room and a tub and a hot water system. He and his entire family absolutely loved it. And they started to invite all their friends to come over and see it. And some even took a bath in it. Every time anyone saw it, They wanted one too. You can imagine, the kids were super busy over the next couple of months building these magic rooms with tubs in them. The word spread so fast that it seemed like instantly everyone in the entire town wanted one right now. While the kids were building so many of these for families throughout the valley, they had a hard time trying to figure out what to call this new invention. It seemed awkward to keep telling people they would build you a hot water system with a separate room attached to your house with a tub in it. One day, after finishing a project for another family, the kids started to think about what to call their new invention. Finally, Levi said, "Why don't we just call it a hot tub room?" Then Laura said, "Levi, you are perfectly correct. It is a room with a tub in it. But it is also a room we can now take a bath. Maybe we should call it a hot bath tub room." I propose... Then Gemma said, "Wait a second. I love the name bathroom." Because Isaac had just said maybe we can shorten it to bathroom, because it's the room you take a bath in. And Gemma said, "I love the name bathroom." That is perfect. I propose we officially call this new invention the bathroom. All in favor, please stand up. With that, everyone stood up and shouted, "Yahoo, yippee-I-do," and the bathroom was officially invented by these super smart kids. The end. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story of creating hot water, because before that, people didn't have a good way to make hot water, and it took forever on a stove to even get one pan hot. So a lot of people used to live like that. And this invention of running hot water changed the world. It made it so you could take big bathtubs whenever you wanted. And each of you in your own home get to do a hot bath if you want. So I hope you enjoyed the story, and I hope you enjoyed listening to yourself working so well with all your other cousins. I hope you have a great day. I love you so much. And thanks for inventing the bathroom. Bye-bye. Have a good day.